How many people here are engineers of some description? How many are people managers? You can't have your hand up for both, Phil. That's a cheat. You're ahead of technology. Okay, so this is more, I think, focused on the engineering side of things, but it's probably interesting if you became an engineering manager early on in your career too. So back in April time, we put on TechEdge, and I talked about what I thought software engineering was, and my colleague now, James, picked this out as one of his sort of key takeaways, which was that we need to find a way to progress maturity in software engineering as a discipline, and rushing people into management positions to progress them in their career is probably not always the best thing. So I've taken that and some of my experiences from way back when I was a teacher to talk about something called the Peter Principle. So if you've ever come across this, it's a really interesting principle. It's basically saying that you will always get promoted to the point that you're incompetent. I saw this in teaching because the best classroom teachers go on to become non-teaching staff. They look after the rest of their colleagues, and quite often they were pretty terrible at that. And if you've ever gone into engineering, or if you are an engineer and you're thinking about becoming an engineering manager, you might think that this is perhaps my only way forward. Not so. The corollary, I think, is even more interesting, which is basically when you look around and see other people in charge, you know that they're completely incompetent. Hopefully my bosses aren't here. Oh no, he's over there. It's not a new idea. This is from a play back in 1763, where a sergeant is saying that he knows he's good at that job, but he probably would be quite bad at the thing above and would definitely be terrible at the thing right at the top. So it's not a new idea at all. This sort of dovetails into something called the 10,000 hours from Outliers from Malcolm Gladwell's book. He says that 10,000 hours is the magic number of greatness. This has been hotly debated over the years, but actually what he means is that if you've got the right level of natural ability, it's going to take an awful lot of work for you to make that ability manifest. So for you to become really the best at whatever you do, you've got to put in a huge amount of effort. Being an engineer, I've put some noddy maths together. So I've tried to calculate at work how much deliberate practice you might be able to achieve, where T is the number of hours worked per week, L is the number of hours of lunch you take per week, and 0.6 is the coefficient of efficiency. So basically, it boils down to about 19.5 hours. Taking into account that you might work for 45 weeks a year, that means it's going to take you 11 and a half years of work to get to be a master of whatever you choose to do. So I don't know how many people have progressed out of their roles within 2 or 3, 4 years, but this is something that I thought was quite interesting. So how many people have actually achieved mastery of engineering before they progressed out of their role? Even more noddy, I've made a graph. And in this you can see that I think that the first 1,000 hours account for roughly 10% of your mastery. The next 1,000 hours account for the next sort of 80%. And the final 8,000 hours are probably where you really get to grips with it, the last 10%. These are the really hard-won battle scars of things. To put that into some context, a year is about here, 2 years gets you about 70% of the way, and 5 years will get you around about 97%. So it grows in length as you go up that scale. I mean, clearly it's completely rubbish. I've just made this up. It's a graph that I put into Excel. I made the numbers up myself. But there is some truth to it. If we want people to reach this level of mastery, it's clear they're going to have to put some time into it. And if we're progressing them out of these technical roles too quickly, then they're not going to actually get to world class. How are we going to make sure that our engineering discipline is reaching the absolute peak that we want it to be? It might mean, though, that people don't see the progression that they expect as quickly as they expect it. So that's something that we're going to have to take into account as a management team. Going back to my graph, this might look something like this, where you come in right at the bottom as a graduate, you toil away for your first year and get somewhere pretty next to nothing. Then you can become an engineer and excel quite quickly. And this is the exciting bit, where you're learning so much and you're really developing very quickly. A senior might come a bit further along. So this is anywhere between sort of 2 and 5 years plus. And then right at the far end, what we would have now at Skybet is something like this, where you'd be a tech lead or a lead software engineer. And this is probably way off into sort of 7 years plus, 8 years of experience, where you've got a lot to fall back on. You know when to take the shortcuts, and you know when to really dig in and say, I've got to do this the right way. So what comes after a tech lead? Because I guess even if you've won this experience, there's got to be something else. Well, pretty much anything's possible. There's loads of roles out there. I got an email the other day from Amazon that was singing the praises of their principal a community, I guess, where they talk about the distinguished engineers and all that sort of stuff. So there is always a way to keep technical and keep your experience and really excel without having to go into a management course. Why do I think this is so important? Well, it's mainly because our teams need to have the right balance. And if we keep pumping people in at an inexperienced end and then shoveling them off quickly before they actually develop the skills they need to become excellent engineers, it's going to mean that we're going to stay in a state of perpetual immaturity. And that's something that we've got to really address, given how quickly the digital industry is growing and how quickly we need to staff up our businesses. We need to be able to provide clear development plans for people. We want people to be able to progress and know where they're going, so they feel that they're actually achieving something. They're not going to have to go away from the thing that they love doing to be able to progress and develop more. And we need to set realistic expectations so that managers and the engineers can agree that they know there's something there for them, and they can take their time. They're not going to be rushing about anything. But above all else, it's about valuing patience, because it takes, as my colleague Adam says, it takes time to get good at something, and everyone needs to acknowledge that. Thank you.